Are you tired of redecorating your home every couple of years to keep up with current trends? Do you love thrifting and antiquing and collecting unique finds, but are not sure how to make everything work together without feeling like a random pile of crap? Same here, so I have some thoughts for you. I have learned a lot over the past couple of years about timeless design and about creating unique and eclectic spaces that still feel cohesive. And today we are returning to the place where that journey started for me, my grandma's house. So in this video, I'm gonna be giving you a tour of my grandma's house with sort of three things in mind. First, we're gonna be looking at this space as kind of a masterclass in timeless design. This house was decorated in the 90s and hasn't really had any significant changes since then. I grew up visiting this house for as long as I can remember, and it's always looked basically the same and has stood the test of time. So as we tour today, I'm gonna be sharing 12 tips for timeless design that this home design has taught me. Also, as we tour, there are so many incredible vintage and antique pieces in this house. It's crazy. So we're gonna take this opportunity to collectively geek out on all the amazing finds that are here. And finally, as we go, we're gonna be looking for some things that we can still update and improve. Again, the style here is pretty timeless, so we're not gonna be making any major changes, but still, some things are screaming 90s. So as we go here, I want you to help me identify those things. Write it down in the comments what we need to be updating to make this look the best it can look. I may not agree with you, but it'd be nice to get some fresh eyes on this space as well, so let me know what you think as we go. I can't wait to take you on a tour of this beautiful space and also share some of my design history and origins, so let's jump on it. Okay, so welcome back to Reissued. If you're new here, my name is Andrew. If you're not new here, you may know that I like to sort of start multiple plot lines here on the channel without wrapping them up yet. So let's recap the ongoing plot lines here. We have the living room makeover at my house, which is well underway. We have the studio makeover, which you may have forgotten about because it's been so long since I've given an update on that on my channel. I really want to wrap that up this year. We have just a little bit left to go. We also are doing the loft apartment bedroom makeover at Matt's place. And then here we are starting something new. We're gonna be doing some projects in this space as well, so that's part of why I wanted to start with giving you a tour. If you wanna follow along with the slow burn Reissued saga and see some of these plot lines resolved, go ahead and be sure that you're subscribed. Also, shout out to my sister Katie for letting us into the house today to do this tour. My grandma passed in 2021, and so my sister has been living here for the last 3 years or so, I think. So there have been a few changes made to the space to fit Katie's needs and to incorporate her things into the space as well. And as we continue to make changes, we want to be sure that her style is represented. However, there's so much good stuff here design-wise to start with that we want to keep that intact as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna start by popping out to the exterior for a minute here. As I mentioned, this house was built in the 90s, and we are seeing some of those quintessentially 90s design elements with the stucco especially. I love the really beautiful details with the brick pathway and doorstep, the little copper roof over the bay window. These are elements that really elevate the look. But the key takeaway and tip number one that I wanna start with on the outside of the house here is that we're really starting with a tight and unified color palette. This color palette on the exterior with this kind of sandy, seashell tone and the dark wood door. This is something we're going to see repeated throughout the entire house. So this is setting the tone, starting with something that's very tight and cohesive, and then allowing to expand from there. Okay, now moving into the entry. Right away, I want to draw your attention to a lot of the classic details that are happening here, namely with the moldings. They're really thick baseboards, and then the chunky crown molding has another molding below it. It's all painted out, so we end up with these really big, substantial looking moldings that add a sense of grandeur and customization beyond a standard builder grade kind of look. We're going to talk about this as we go, but also make this house feel incredibly classic. Now, if you're thinking about introducing an element to your space and are wondering if it's classic, I think it's important to think about the history of that trend or design element and see how many times it's been around the block. For instance, I feel like in 2019, we saw a lot of people putting those moldings up on the wall to kind of create definition. That feels very classically French. It also feels like a New York pre-war apartment. That trend has been cycled over and over through hundreds of years. So that's such a timeless choice, even though it was trending at that time, right? So right away in here with the moldings and the window shapes and a lot of the fixtures that were chosen for this house, they feel incredibly timeless because they feel like trends that have been around the block a number of times. Now, the other thing that hits me when walking into this entry is the beautiful antique and vintage pieces. And so tip number 3 has to be that vintage and antique are forever. You know I'm at the thrift store all the time on my channel. I love vintage and antique pieces. And for me, of course, it's about the cost. I love to save some money where I can. but it's also about having elements in the room that are bringing in character and that also have been around for a while that are going to stand the test of time. So in this room, we have some beautiful Asian antique pieces, this tansu chest at the front, this beautiful inlaid screen over the top, this gorgeous brass chandelier. These are elements that span a number of different time periods and are difficult to tie down to one particular point in time. And so therefore, this room has looked like this for 30 years and still holds up design-wise, I think. So let's continue on forward into the living room.
I'm obsessed with this piece of art and I want this in my living room.
Editing Andrew from the future here. I am home now. I got back earlier today. I am pretty sunburned. We went to the beach yesterday, which was super fun. We also did some arranging around the house with the office and the bedroom, which you're gonna see here in a minute. But as a part of that process, we moved some things around and I ended up taking this piece home with me. I also did some digging in some of the closets and cabinets and came out with a haul of really cool accessories. I'm gonna show you those later in the video, so stay tuned for that. So now, before I wrap up my editing, let's all take a little break and make some mud water, which is the sponsor of today's video. Now, I have always been a big coffee drinker, but I sometimes feel that it can make me a little bit jittery or keep me up late at night, especially if I drink it as a midday pick-me-up like I usually would on a long day of editing like this. So my new afternoon pick-me-up routine is a little mud water to promote focus, energy, and immunity. Mud water contains a combination of powerful and organic ingredients, including lion's mane, cordyceps, and reishi that come together to taste like chai with a hint of cacao. I like to add a little honey or sugar for sweetness and sometimes some almond milk for creaminess. Mix everything up with the frother for a smooth, rich taste. I enjoy the ritual and the energy boost of a hot drink midday, but with mud water, I'll actually be able to sleep tonight. Right now, you can click the link in the description or click the QR code on screen to get the mud water starter pack. Be sure to use my code REISSUED for 15% off your starter kit, as well as a free frother to make all your concoctions smooth and blended. So join me in upgrading your afternoon pick-me-up routine with mud water. Okay, moving into the living room. I love this space so much, and probably one of the biggest things that I always think about with this room is the giant wall of built-ins. I'm doing that in my living room for a reason. I just love having a beautiful collection of elements in this space. My grandmother was a master of collecting beautiful pottery and sculpture and kind of off-the-wall art pieces, and so those have always been displayed really beautifully in this room. Which brings me to tip number 4. If you can do a built-in, do a built-in. I find that sometimes having an element of the space, whether it's a banquette or some built-in shelving like this, having an element that's grounded in the space makes it feel a lot more custom, but also kind of permanent. I think about those kind of built-in planters in the 70s or any kind of fireplace or mantle that's original to a house. It just gives some element of character and also something that feels like it needs to stay in the space and grounds it in a time and place, if that makes sense. Furniture and styling can pass through over time, but having something actually be permanent gives a space an identity beyond just 4 walls. And this is something that we're going to talk about in a minute with color, but I think sometimes when we think about timeless, we think about neutral or something that appeals to everyone rather than making a bold statement and sticking with that. And so rather than going for the most neutral thing or the most baseline thing, taking something in a very specific direction can help it last better over time because it declares itself as something unique and special and not to be discarded from the design, if that makes sense. Now, as for notable vintage pieces in this room, one is this beautiful piano. My mom said that this piano used to be painted avocado green, and one of my grandma's boyfriends at one point stripped everything down back to the natural wood finish. This piano was not in the best working order and it probably needs to be restrung, and we got a quote for that, and it was very expensive, so I don't know if that will happen, but I just love the look of this in the space, and the warm wood is just everything to me. It's also kind of funny how the things that you grew up around sort of embed in you style-wise. I'm noticing for the first time that these lamps in the living room have this kind of ginger jar bottom shape on them that is very similar to some lamps that I have in my house. Also, this piece that used to have little figurines and stuff in it that's now serving as a liquor cabinet. This piece reminded me so much of the piece that I put in my bathroom. Again, there's so many things about this space that feel like they have bled into my design style, and so I thought it would be fun to share this with you. All right, popping into the dining room. Pretty simple here. Again, we're seeing some beautiful antique pieces. This screen is stunning. The beadwork and crystals on the chandelier are very unique and specific and beautiful. One element that's really on display here is a sense of cohesion between the shapes. So we have some kind of chinoiserie pieces. We have some authentic Asian antiques. We also have some very classic traditional pieces, but everything is kind of tied together here by these sort of swirl shapes. Which brings me to tip number 5. I think that using an eclectic design style is a really great way to make sure that a space feels timeless. But if you're worried about things not feeling unified, look to the actual shapes themselves. Are we seeing square shapes? Are we seeing swirls? Are there a lot of rounded edges? We often think of color as being the unifying thing, but shape can be very unifying as well. All right, so now we are moving into the kitchen, and this is one of the spaces that I think needs the most updating, not just because there are elements of it that might feel a bit dated, but also because the cabinets are definitely showing some wear, the doors are a little bit warped, so I think we will probably do a full resurfacing of the cabinetry in this kitchen at some point. However, the thing that I want to draw your attention to in this kitchen is how there are elements that read very quintessentially 90s, but also somehow feel irreplaceably appropriate for this house. Allow me to explain. First, we have white appliances. Again, that was a big thing in the 90s, then we saw the switch over to everything being stainless steel. But I think that stainless appliances wouldn't really work with the color tones and the general palette that's happening in this house. And so even though that's a choice that may seem dated, it seems like the best choice here, right? Similarly with these kind of like pickled wood, blushy pink cabinets, we're gonna see the same finish throughout a lot of spaces in the house. This is something that does feel quintessentially 90s with that pickled wood finish. However, when I start to think about how to transform these cabinets, if we're doing a refacing, if we're painting them, whatever, there is some element of this that I still think is really working. It's bringing in those same blushy seashell kind of colors, but giving it more texture with the wood grain. The checkerboard pattern on the backsplash feels like it has come full circle in terms of checker trending again. I'm not loving these little white knobs. I like the idea of maybe something ceramic, but maybe with an antique brass kind of finish in there as well, just to give this a little bit more depth. Something about the big chunky white knobs does feel kind of 90s to me, but I'm interested to hear your opinions on this. Go ahead and weigh in on this kitchen on a couple of things. First of all, what should we do with the cabinets? Should we keep kind of a pickled wood finish? Should we do a paint treatment? Should we go in a completely different direction? Also, let me know what you think about the hardware. And then finally, the bar top is high here. We're thinking about lowering it, maybe, but I think it also kind of works high. So let me know what you think about that too. The thing about trends, as much as I dislike them or try to avoid them, is that they can be pretty unavoidable because of what materials or styles may be available at the time that you're doing a project, or because whatever is popular or mainstream at the time does kind of have a way of seeping into whatever we're working on. But I think the real lesson here is that when you are incorporating trends, it's a good idea to use trends that incorporate well into the design and the location of your home. So this pickled wood feels very appropriate for the blushy tones that we're working with. It also feels very Florida appropriate. That's where we're located. Same with the tile floors. Certain things that may feel a little bit dated in other spaces still feel very appropriate within a Florida landscape and climate. So consider how appropriate the trend is for the design style and the architectural style and the location of your home. And if those match up, go with it. Okay, moving back to the living room and into the office. Now, this is a room that I know really well. Anytime we would visit when I was growing up, I would stay in this room, so I've been here a lot. However, this is the room that's probably changed the most in terms of the way that it's furnished. We still have this beautiful mid-century rosewood desk that is just so stunning. Be still my heart, it's gorgeous. That used to be over in front of the window. Also, the black leather egg chair that now is in my bedroom used to be in this room back in the day. But these incredible abstract paintings have always lived in this room, and we've rearranged things to kind of keep the spirit of what was there, hopefully. Now, in terms of tips for this room, I want to zero in on this lampshade right here. I talked about this in a recent live, but one of my best tips for choosing unexpected things for a space is to see things as they are, not as the trends they were a part of. So this little accordion kind of lampshade is something that reads very 90s to me, but when you zoom in and break it down and look at it as it is, as this kind of like origami folded sculptural lampshade, I think it's really cool. So it's something that on the surface reads kind of 90s, but I think ultimately is really cool and timeless. Hey everyone, Editing Andrew popping in here for a moment. I realized that I didn't make it clear when I filmed this. All of the items in the house were collected by my grandma Shirley over time. However, at the time this house was built, she had the assistance of designer Gary Killow to help her put everything together and choose paint colors and such. And so I've linked Gary's website down below so you can check him out as well. Okay, moving into the guest bathroom. Now, right off the bat, the thing that I love the most in this space is the wallpaper. There's this kind of fish motif. It has these beautiful beiges with this gold accent. Something about this I just think is completely timeless because it's so unique. I've never seen it anywhere before. We'll talk about that with the wallpaper in the other bathroom. But yeah, I'm definitely taking inspiration for this for the wallpaper design that I want to do for my living room with this kind of like two-tone with the gold. I think that's stunning. The other thing that really stands out to me in this room, tip number 8, mixing metals. So we have some gold elements here on the handles and the hinges and the wallpaper, but we also have these chrome handles in the shower and the sink. I think the chrome with this beautiful enamel, again, that feels kind of vintagey and so timeless, but I think the decision to combine the more brass elements in the chrome is something that doesn't tie you to one specific era, right? So I think that combining some black or some chrome and some gold, putting those things together a couple at a time is a great way to extend the longevity of that design, which is important for fixtures that are permanent and that also can be very expensive. What's not working for me in this room, I think some of the towel bars, they just read a little bit contractor grade. And that's something that if I'm putting a really critical eye on for this house, this was a new build in the 90s and there are some elements here with the towel bars and the light fixture. They just feel a little bit like that was the contractor grade option. So if I were gonna go in and update this space, I would focus on those elements that feel very off the rack 90s, as opposed to the elements that feel like they're working for the space, like this pickled cabinet finish. I also think that a better shower curtain rod and some rings would be a super inexpensive way to elevate this look a bit. I'm on the fence with the lacy shower curtain here. There definitely is an element to certain parts of the house that does feel grandma in a way that maybe isn't good. I don't know. Part of me feels like it's almost so wrong that it's right. I don't know. Let me know what you think. All right, moving into the guest bedroom where I'm staying this weekend. Right away, you'll notice we have color, baby. That kind of tealy, blue-green celadon vibe that we've seen popping up in various accessories around the house is in full force here. And I actually really love that choice to go super bold in one room. And so that brings me to tip number 9, commit to unique color. Most of the house is super neutral. We love neutrals. I think that's a great place to start. But if you're gonna go for color, I say go all the way. I love that we've been seeing color drenching as a trend in the last couple of years, where rather than an accent wall or rather than just being safe with color, if you go full blown and make a commitment to that choice, again, it feels like it's creating a moment in that space that feels like a statement. And a statement is like a great work of art in that it feels timeless to me. Now, a couple of standout antique pieces here. First of all, this little chest that's beside the bed is so stunning. I kind of have an obsession with things that have little drawers, and I just think that this is incredibly unique and ornate, and the wood tone is rich. It's just everything I love in one piece of furniture. I also love this dark wood chest over on the wall. Again, the thing that I'm loving about the color palette in the house is that this kind of like mauve and teal world could feel very 90s, but when punched up with these dark woods and black tones, it suddenly feels a lot more interesting and less rooted in that 90s aesthetic. You'll also start to see some cohesion happening here, which we'll talk about in a moment, with the repetition of these Asian trunks and these long neck lady artworks. Also with the stunning screen. Now, this screen actually used to live in the primary bedroom as a headboard. Part of the reason that we're refreshing is that some of the pieces in this house are going to other family members. So this screen will be going to my uncle, I think, so it's on its way out. So we're gonna be doing a refresh in the bedroom first to kind of account for that lack of a headboard situation. So right now, it's just taking a pit stop in this room while we figure out the primary bedroom. There are some grandma elements here that feel a little bit cutesy, a little bit cheesy. I would like to see those move on, but the core furniture here and this color are just incredible. Okay, so we moved back through the entry toward the kitchen. There's a little passageway that has laundry and then the passage to the garage. Then we enter into the primary suite. It has its own little unit of the house with a separate door. And so here we are in the primary bathroom. Now, I mentioned about the wallpaper. I love the wallpaper in the other bathroom. Personally, I'm not sure that this one has aged well. This one feels 90s in both the paisley design and also with that mauve and teal kind of color scheme. Again, I love that we're doing a unified color scheme throughout the house, but something about combining a trend both in pattern and in color scheme feels like it's kept this from aging as gracefully as the rest of the house, in my opinion. Now, I know that paisley has been around forever, and I'm not opposed to paisley, and I know that it's not specifically attached to the 90s, but I think that if it were done in a more classic color scheme, it would have aged better. So my tip here would be, if you're going with a print that feels kind of trendy, maybe to choose some colors that are a bit more classic. And if you're going with trendy colors, maybe choose a pattern that's like super off the wall and unique. Again, the fish are not tied to any specific time period. They just feel really unique and one of a kind. Bottom line, I love a bold print. I love an all over wallpaper, but maybe don't double up on the trendy color scheme and the trendy print. Maybe I'm off base, maybe y'all love this combo in this bathroom, but I would like to see this get updated. Now, as for the rest of the bathroom, again, I love that we're mixing metals here. I'm not sure that the shower is the most updated looking or the tub, but I think that they're working in the space. Same with these kind of yellowed solid surface sinks. We actually don't take these at the REISSUED as donations anymore because no one wants them. I think they've been universally decided to be dated. I don't think it's bad in this room, but if I were really gonna deeply update, that's something that I would touch for sure. Simpler things to update is in both bathrooms, I really would like there to be a frame around the mirror. Again, I feel like just the mirror and the wall feels very contractor grade to me, and I think that having a frame around it would just make it feel more elevated and custom, which we love. So yeah, to me, out of every room in the house, this is probably the one that feels the most dated, but kitchens and bathrooms are hard that way just because things age over time and because the technology changes of what's possible. So some updates might be necessary here, but not too bad. All right, finishing the tour in the primary bedroom. Now, I wanted to finish the tour here because this is the first space that we're going to be updating here in the house. I mentioned that we moved the screen out of here, so we're in need of a new bed situation. So I actually thrifted a bed that I'm going to reupholster. So part of my journey here this weekend is to be looking at paint samples and fabric swatches and really solidifying what the design is going to be for this space, which is very exciting. So most of the changes that are going to be happening here are going to involve the bed and that sort of surrounding immediate area, but we're going to do some styling and other things as well. Also, the color in here, while I like the blushy thing, it is very pink and it's maybe making the room feel a bit dark. So we're definitely going to update the paint color, but keep it in that kind of seashell desert dune world. Over on the opposite wall, I thrifted some new lampshades for these lamps. I love these lamps overall, but the hearts on the lampshade are just, again, doing that cutesy grandma thing. Don't love that. However, let's all take a moment to admire these black lacquer campaign dressers and these beautiful bamboo look mirrors over the top. I love them styled with this candlestick in the middle. Everything about this to me is just like chef's kiss, stunning. So that all is going to stay intact. We need to design the room around that. It's working functionally, but also is just so gorgeous. This room originally had those two slipper chairs that were in the office and we swapped them out. I think the chairs actually worked better in here to create a seating area by the window, so we might swap those out again. Let me know what you think. I think that will work better for the flow of the room. But yeah, Katie and I were talking about it today. We really want this to feel like kind of a luxury boutique hotel kind of story, which I'm really into. And I think this is going to be a really fun way to pay homage to my grandma and the things that she added to this space, but also make it feel right for my sister, who's a bit more minimal and clean in her aesthetic. So I mentioned that I got some mid-century nightstands that I hope work for this room. They might be too small. I brought one so that we can try and see, but I'm really hoping that they do so that I can take this piece home with me. Okay, so now that we've visited all of the rooms in the house, one of the key takeaways here is that there's a real cohesion between everything. So yes, everything feels personal and it is a collection, and there's a lot of beautiful vintage and antique pieces, but somehow they all work together. So tip number 11 here for timeless style is to collect things you love, to put things in your space that feel personal to you. However, in the interest of keeping things cohesive and making them still feel designy, I think it's important to consider, as you acquire new pieces, considering them as a part of your collection as opposed to just individual pieces. So if you're at a store and you're like, wow, that really speaks to me, rather than grabbing a bunch of standalone pieces that don't really relate to each other, starting to notice patterns in what you love and acquiring more of the same type of pieces. So maybe that means getting multiples of the same style. Clearly, we've seen repetitions of the Asian inlaid screens, these wood, heavy, chunky chest pieces, and even the little green foo dogs that pop up in multiple spaces to make things feel unified. We're also seeing the color palette for the house be pulled from the objects as well. Again, that kind of blue-green color in the guest room is pulled directly from a lot of the accessories and furniture pieces. And so if you're early on in building your collection, you might feel overwhelmed by, how do I know what goes together if I don't have anything yet? How can I be shopping for things that I love if I don't have a baseline to choose from? And my advice for that comes from personal experience, is that I've been collecting things over time and I've noticed what patterns are emerging and noticed how my tastes have shifted. And so the style that I've come to recognize as my own that makes it easier to shop for myself has taken a while to build. It takes time to get to know yourself as you decorate your home. And that brings me to my final tip, number 12. Not everything is going to make the cut in your home. So a couple of pieces in my house, the Moravian star that's on my porch, the rug that's in my guest bathroom, those were pulled directly out of my grandma's attic. These things were sitting in the attic because they didn't make the cut to be styled in the house. Doesn't mean they weren't good pieces, but at the end of the day, my grandma and her designer had an editing eye to what would make the cut when this house was decorated. And so I think sometimes as collectors of beautiful items, as I know so many of you out there are, we get very attached to things and we think, oh, we have to make this work in our space. And while I think that that's a great jumping off point for getting a space started, and we should put things into our rooms that we love, at some point cohesion in the room and livability and practicality have to take the forefront, and we have to start to eliminate the things that aren't working. Having that editing eye and not holding on to everything is going to help you get that unified look that doesn't feel like a bunch of stuff in a space that shouldn't go together. Eclectic does not necessarily mean all-inclusive. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that I went through a bunch of the closets and cabinets looking for things that were not out on display that were still really beautiful that I could maybe grab for my built-ins or other parts of my house. So let me show you what I found. Okay, so first up is this little tray. This reminds me a lot of the ginger jar lamps that I have in the house. It looks to be hand painted. Love the red orange color. You know, that's my color right now. I just thought this was super pretty. Up here, we have this little urn. You can see that it only has one leg and then it needs 3 to stand up. I was not sure how to fix that, but the other 2 legs are actually down in the bottom there. So we're gonna see if we can affix those back on somehow and have this stand back up. I think that's really pretty. Next up, we have a little brass tea kettle. I think that's so pretty. I love brass. And next up, we have this little silver caddy situation with these crystal bottles inside. They have the little stoppers and everything. Not entirely sure what this is intended to be used for. I think that it would look really pretty in my bathroom, even not being used, just sitting there, but maybe I'll pop some bath salts or something like that inside to make it functional. These here, I had to do a Google image search on these. Apparently these are conquistador stirrups. A lot of them date to the 1800s, I believe. So these look to be brass. There's a set of 2. I think that at one point she had these hanging on the wall with maybe some plants inside them. So totally stealing that idea. We're gonna do that somewhere, I think. Next up, we have this little Indian folk art horse. I think all the stitching and beading on this is really pretty. The colors are a little bit wilder than what I'll go for usually, so I'm not sure if I can make this work, but I thought I would pull it just in case to add a little pop of color. Ooh, and also we have these little foo dogs that I found in one of the built-in cabinets. I think these might have gone on the mantle at one point, I'm not sure. One of them, the tongue is just a little bit broken, but overall I just think they're super fun. And finally, I found this roll of leftover fish wallpaper from the bathroom. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with it as usual, but I think this would be really pretty on the back of a china cabinet or something, just a limited area. I just love the neutral tones and the little gold accents, so why not? Let's bring it home. All right, everybody, thank you so much for going on this tour with me today. It's really fun to re-examine this space, to recognize my own design tastes and patterns in this space. It's funny how those things stick with you. It's also very exciting to embark on a new journey here with refreshing this space, doing justice to my grandma's beautiful taste, and also making it work for my sister. It's gonna be really fun. I can't wait to get started on that. If you wanna follow along for that process, be sure that you're subscribed. If you enjoyed this video and found these tips useful, be sure to hit the like button. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon.